This is the new Genesis Electrified GV70, and in this review we're going to tell you the 10 key things you need to know about it. But before we get started, if you want to get a great deal on a new car, make sure to head over to whatcar.com. And if you want to see any more reviews like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Isn't it great when two things you love come together, like sunshine on a bank holiday, or finally finding out that pineapple does work on a pizza, or in the case of the car we're testing today, the Genesis GV70 and electric power? Because while we like the standard GV70 with its impressive cruising manners and beautifully designed interior, it's always been let down by a relatively inefficient range of petrol and diesel engines. So surely if you replace those with electric power, it'll fix the standard car's main problem. But before we dive into how the electrified GV70 drives, let's consider what it's up against. So if you're in the market for a premium electric family SUV, you'll also be considering the Audi Q8 e-tron, the BMW iX3, the Jaguar I-Pace, and maybe even the Mercedes EQC. Or if you're willing to sacrifice on space, you could go down a size and get a range-topping Volvo C40 twin motor or Tesla Model Y performance for the same price as an electrified GV70. So what do you get for your money on the inside of the electrified GV70? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. I mean, check out the size of this 14.5-inch infotainment system. That makes it one of the largest in the class. And while we will admit that does present some problems, for example, it can be quite a stretch to reach the smaller icons on the far side of the screen. You also can control it using this rotary dial controller that's located on the center console. It's very similar to the dial that you get in the BMW iX3 as part of BMW's iDrive system, and the best part about it is it means you don't have to take your eyes from the road very long when you're trying to find a function in the infotainment system. You also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, which is great if you want to use one of your smartphone's apps or bypass the car's native operating system. But to be honest, we find the layout of this infotainment system easier to use than BMW's latest iDrive unit, which makes this system one of the easiest to use in the class. But not only do you get a great infotainment system, you also get a great level of interior quality. On the dashboard you have this lovely leather, you also have contrast stitching, and even on the seats you have a lovely mix between leather and fabric. And you also get soft touch materials everywhere you look, and in some places that you wouldn't normally look, like the bottom of the doors. We would, however, recommend going for the optional Napa leather pack, because it gets you beautiful diamond quilted seats, a suede headlining, and a more eclectic mix of colour schemes for the interior. And if you go for the dark green in particular, you almost feel like you're sitting in a Bentley, which is probably no coincidence because Bentley's former design director now works for Genesis. Another great thing about the interior of the electrified GV70 is you have loads of adjustment both in the steering wheel and in the driver's seat. And even in its lowest position, you're naturally sat quite high, which makes you feel like you're driving a proper SUV. And it also gives you the benefit of having better visibility, particularly out the front, because you can see all the way to the bottom of the bonnet. As standard, you also get a very high definition and clear digital driver's display. And if you go for the optional innovation pack like this car has, you also get a head-up display, which is easy to read while you're on the move. The innovation pack also introduces a kind of 3D effect function for the digital driver's display, but I find it to be a bit of a gimmick, and if I stare at it for too long, I get a little bit of a headache, so I just make sure I turn it off. It's also pretty practical up front. On the center console, you've got this lidded cubby here that when you open it, has a wireless charging pad for your phone. You get a couple of cup holders, quite a large glove box, and a big cubby under your central armrest. If you've got your heart set on buying an electrified GV70, we would recommend going to a dealer first and sitting in a car with the optional comfort seats. They are quite expensive, but they get you a ventilation function, a massage function, and active side bolsters that inflate and hold you in place when you go around a corner. The only thing is, they are quite firm, and some of my colleagues quite enjoyed the support that they gave them, but for me, they're a little bit too firm on a long journey and can be a little bit uncomfortable. So we recommend trying them first before you buy. There's as much space in the back of the electrified GV70 as there is in the regular car, and that means most tall adults will fit without a problem. I'm 5'9" and I have plenty of legroom, and that's with my front seat set in my driving position, and I also have plenty of headroom, and you can make even more by reclining your rear seat if you want to lean back on a long journey. It's also wider in the back than a BMW iX3, which makes it great for 3 people sitting across the rear bench, as does the fact that there's only a small hump in the middle of the floor. To look at, the electrified GV70 is pretty unassuming. You certainly wouldn't expect it to have the performance to embarrass a Porsche Cayman away from the traffic lights, but it does. Thanks to having twin electric motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear, putting out a combined 483 brake horsepower. This can accelerate from 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 4.2 seconds, which is ridiculously quick for a family SUV, and makes it faster than an equivalent BMW iX3, Audi Q8 e-tron, Mercedes EQC, or Jaguar I-Pace. But there is a catch though. To get that full 483 brake horsepower, you have to press a button on the steering wheel labelled boost, like you're in some sort of Fast and the Furious movie and you're pressing a button to get extra NOS. It's a bit of an odd choice, and we're not sure why Genesis has done it and not just built a switch into the accelerator pedal like you would get from most manufacturers, but it does add some drama to proceedings. But if you don't press the boost button, you have to make do with a measly 429 brake horsepower. But in reality, that's still enough punch to push your head back into the seat rest when making a last-minute overtake. So I would recommend telling your passengers when you're going to put your foot down. As for range, the electrified GV70 with its 74 kilowatt-hour battery can do around 280 miles on a full charge, which is about the same as what you would get from a BMW iX3, but it's hardly groundbreaking. For example, the latest Audi Q8 e-tron has a claimed range of around 330 miles on a full charge.
However, as with all electric cars, the official range is not representative of real-world driving conditions, so you're more likely to achieve around 220 miles in the electrified GV70. When you need to charge up the electrified GV70, a home wallbox charger will get you a full charge in 12 hours, while a 50 kilowatt-hour public CCS charging point will take you from 10 to 80% in just over an hour. If you're able to find a quicker charger, the GV70 will accept a maximum charging rate of 240 kilowatts, which is faster than the BMW iX3. At that speed, you'll go from empty to 80% in around 18 minutes.
Handling-wise, it's important to acknowledge that this is a tall, heavy electric SUV, so it's never going to be the last word in driver enjoyment. But while it rolls in corners a little bit more than the more driver-focused BMW iX3 and Jaguar I-Pace, there's always plenty of grip on offer, and the steering is surprisingly well weighted and accurate, allowing you to place the nose exactly where you want it on the road. If you live in a part of the country that often gets bad weather, or perhaps you just live in the countryside where the road is constantly covered in dirt, you'll also be pleased to know that the GV70 Electrified effectively has four-wheel drive because it has a front motor and a rear motor. And what that means is you're basically guaranteed great traction on the exit of corners regardless of the conditions. And that's not always the case in the rear-wheel drive BMW iX3. So the electrified GV70 feels good on a country road, but to be honest, it feels most at home when you're just cruising on a fast and flowing A road or on the motorway, and that's because it's just so refined. As standard, you get an acoustic windscreen and laminated side windows, so there's virtually no wind noise, and we can't really detect any motor whine, and that's something you can't say about the Audi Q8 e-tron. So what's the best thing about the electrified GV70? Well, it has to be what I've just mentioned, which is its impressive on-road refinement. And that can be improved even further if you go for something called an optional second row comfort pack that adds double laminated rear glass. Plus, if you add the reasonably priced Lexicon sound system, you get active noise cancelling technology, which is really useful if your commute involves coarse road surfaces like the concrete sections on the M25. We reckon the worst thing about the electrified GV70 is its boot, but not for the reasons you might first expect. You see, it's the same size as the standard GV70's boot, which means it's comparable to other cars in the class, certainly in terms of length and width. The problem is, Genesis has mounted its tonneau cover far too low, so when you actually fix it in place, there's not a whole lot of space for bags. In fact, we only managed to fit 6 carry-on suitcases in this car compared to 8 in the Audi e-tron, BMW iX3 and Mercedes EQC. And we even managed to fit 7 bags in the Jaguar I-Pace. So really, it is quite disappointing.
Despite the premium electric family SUV class being ultra competitive, the electrified GV70 more than holds its own. Not only is it blisteringly quick, good to drive and luxurious to be in, but it's also competitively priced when compared against its direct rivals like the Audi Q8 e-tron, BMW iX3, Jaguar I-Pace and Mercedes EQC, especially when you consider that it has one of the slowest predicted rates of depreciation in the class. To read more about the electrified GV70, go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great deal on your next new car. But before you head over there, to see more reviews like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And tell us in the comments below what you think of the electrified GV70.